When you think about commercial aviation, there's this underlying expectation of absolute precision.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you're hurtling through the stratosphere at 500 miles an hour in a multi-million-dollar aluminum tube. The engineering is flawless. The physics are binary. I mean, it works or it doesn't.
Right. It's an environment that's completely governed by exact calculations. You've got these unforgiving laws of aerodynamics, and, we take a lot of comfort in that precision when we buy a ticket.
We really do. But then you look at how the people flying those machines are actually chosen, and suddenly that mechanical precision gives way to something incredibly complex.
Yeah, it gets messy real fast.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking through our sources for today's deep dive, there's this paradox that immediately jumps out.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about highly trained candidates, people who can flawlessly fly a complex jet through a thunderstorm, right? And they are failing to get a job offer before they even open their mouths to answer a single interview question.
It sounds totally absurd to an outsider, I know. But evaluators see candidates trip over absolute foundational hurdles long before they even reach the behavioral analysis portion of the hiring process.
Which is wild. So today, we're decoding the high-stakes world of airline interviews. Whether you're prepping for a career-defining interview yourself or, you're just fascinated by how elite, high-risk industries select their top talent, the sources we have today are eye-opening.
They really are.
We're pulling from expert guides that break down the core pillars of interview success, plus a highly specialized manual entirely dedicated to mastering the dreaded bad decision interview question, because proving you can fly the jet is just the baseline.
Exactly. What these airlines are really testing is a multi-layered evaluation of, integrity, self-awareness, and systemic thinking.
Right.
And that evaluation starts the exact second the applicant interacts with the hiring system. Evaluators are looking for a complete package. I mean, the transition from a purely technical aviator to a trusted airline employee is a massive leap.
Yeah, and the places where people lose their way are rarely in the flight simulator, right?
Almost never.
So let's start with those hidden tripwires. The things that ruin a candidate's chances before they even step into the interview room. Because the sources indicate that the #1 reason candidates fail to get a class date, the absolute biggest reason they get rejected, isn't a terrible answer to a tough question.
No, it's not.
It's missing paperwork.
Yeah. Just failing to bring the required documents or failing to upload them correctly into the company portal. We're talking about logbooks, medical certificates, passports, FAA records, just basic stuff.
But wait, for those not living in the aviation world, what exactly are we talking about when we say FAA records? Like, why is a missing document such a massive deal?
Well, FAA records encompass an applicant's entire history as an aviator. This includes the PRD, or pilot records database.
Okay.
It tracks every single check ride you've taken, every license you've earned, and crucially, any failures or training difficulties you've had in the past. It's the comprehensive, legal paper trail of your competence.
Right, so it's a big deal.
Huge.
Right.
If you show up without all the specific pages printed, signed, and organized exactly as requested, you're putting a hard stop to the hiring process right there.
It's like a highly skilled surgeon showing up to perform a triple bypass, but they forgot to read the patient's chart. It just shows a breakdown in systemic discipline before the critical work even begins.
That is a much more accurate way to view it, actually, because aviation is an industry built entirely on checklists. Every single phase of flight, from turning on the battery to securing the engines at the gate, it requires strict adherence to a checklist.
Right.
So if an applicant cannot successfully navigate a basic administrative checklist for the most important interview of their life, the airline has to assume they're going to struggle with operational checklists.
The evaluators are essentially sitting there thinking, how is this person going to handle a complex pre-flight checklist on a Boeing 777 at 2 in the morning when they're totally fatigued?
Exactly. So the required action from the expert is super clear here. Build a master checklist of every single required document, organize it meticulously, and triple check it.
And that lack of preparation seems to bleed right into another hidden tripwire the sources highlight, which is the metric testing phase.
Yes. Pillar 5. These are the computer-based cognitive and personality tests that applicants have to complete, often before they even travel to the interview.
And candidates mess these up.
Candidates frequently underestimate them. A pilot might assume that because they have, thousands of hours of real-world flight time, a simple laptop test will be a breeze.
But the sources say these tests are specifically designed to measure cognitive capacity, spatial reasoning, and personality traits under artificial stress. So I have to ask, how do you artificially stress a seasoned pilot on a laptop? Like, what does that actually look like?
It's all about overwhelming the candidate's working memory to see how they prioritize. So a common cognitive test might have you tracking a moving target on the screen with a joystick using one hand. But at the exact same time, you're given a complex math problem to solve on the screen. And through your headphones, an automated air traffic control voice is giving you a sequence of altitude changes that you have to memorize and punch into a keypad.
Oh, wow. So they are actively forcing a task saturation scenario. They want to see what drops first when you are just completely overloaded.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, failing this preparation phase signals a massive lack of attention to detail to the hiring board. The guidance here is that you must use online software to practice these metric tests well in advance.
You can't just wing it.
No, you have to train for the cognitive test just like you train in a physical flight simulator. You build a muscle memory for multitasking so that when the real test comes, you have spare mental capacity.
Okay, so let's follow the journey of the candidate here. Assuming they actually bring their passport, their logbooks are perfectly tabbed, they absolutely crush the metric tests, and they walk into the hiring building.
Right. The paperwork is accepted.
Yeah. Now we transition from the quantitative data to the qualitative data. We're shifting to the human element.
This is where the candidate enters the room with the panel, and the evaluators start really looking at the person behind the paper.
And our sources call out something termed application discontinuity, which happens when a candidate's in-person performance doesn't match the high-level qualifications listed on their written application. But wait, hold on. Let me push back on this for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If an applicant has 5,000 hours of flawless flight time, why should an airline care if they stumble over their words in a stuffy conference room? I mean, flying a plane isn't a public speaking gig. Nerves are completely normal.
Nerves are normal, yeah. And the panel totally expects a baseline of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But the evaluators aren't grading you on your public speaking polish.
Okay.
They're analyzing the delta, the gap between the paper persona and the real person sitting in front of them. Think about it from the panel's perspective. Your resume reads like you're this decisive, experienced captain who's managed complex emergencies and led crews through terrible weather.
Right, you look like an absolute aviation superhero on paper.
But if in person you're timid, or unable to articulate your thoughts clearly, or you're completely overwhelmed by the social pressure of an interview, the evaluators have to ask themselves why that massive gap exists.
That makes sense.
They view this discontinuity as a major red flag. It suggests two possibilities, both of which are really bad. One, the applicant might be disingenuous or, exaggerating their actual leadership experience on their resume.
Yikes. And the second possibility?
That they are simply too nervous to function safely under pressure.
Mm.
I mean, if the stress of answering questions from 3 friendly pilots in a climate-controlled room causes you to experience cognitive lockdown, what happens when an engine catches fire at heavyweight during takeoff?
Wow. Okay, yeah. When you frame it around the engine fire, it completely dismantles the public speaking defense.
Exactly.
The action the sources demand here is that you have to ensure your in-person persona aligns seamlessly with your documented experience. You have to actively embody the leadership and calm you claim to possess on paper.
And a huge part of embodying that persona comes down to simple human interaction. The sources heavily emphasize the concept of likability.
Right, because evaluators are human beings with natural biases.
Yep. If an applicant isn't relaxed, friendly, and confident, the panel actually grades their technical answers more harshly.
So what does this all mean for the candidate? Like, how do you actively project confidence and build rapport when your heart rate is literally through the roof? You can't just fake being best friends with an interview panel.
No, you can't. But the sources suggest a specific psychological shift to build that rapport. You have to walk into that room with the mindset that you already work there.
Oh, interesting.
You treat the panel not as adversaries or interrogators holding your career hostage, but as your future coworkers, your peers, discussing the profession you all share.
But that reframing changes your entire body language. Instead of a defensive posture, you just naturally open up.
Right. You have to remember, the ultimate litmus test, every single evaluator is silently applying while you're talking. They are asking themselves, do I want to sit next to this person on a flight deck for 6 hours?
Right.
Aviation is a team sport. If you're rigid, defensive, or unpleasant in the interview, the answer is going to be no, regardless of your flying skills.
Yeah.
Literally no one wants to be trapped in a metal tube with a jerk.
So true. So we've covered the vibe, the likability, the paperwork. But now we have to dive into how candidates actually speak and structure their words to prove their worth. Because eventually the small talk ends and you have to answer the behavioral questions.
Yeah, being friendly isn't enough if you can't communicate your competence. And this is where candidates often fail because their answers are incomplete or misdirected. They just missed the mark on the core competencies the airline is hunting for.
The sources specifically mention competencies like integrity, conflict resolution, and crew resource management, which pilots refer to as CRM.
Mm-hmm.
For someone not in the industry, what does CRM actually look like in practice?
CRM is basically the science of utilizing all available resources to ensure safety. It means a captain doesn't operate as a dictator.
Right.
It's the active process of gathering input from the first officer, the flight attendants, air traffic control, company dispatchers, to make a well-rounded decision. So interviewers will ask a question designed to test a candidate's CRM, and the candidate will instead tell a rambling story about how they heroically flew the plane out of danger all by themselves.
Missing the point entirely, they showed off their hands-on flying skills when the airline was just trying to see if they knew how to ask for help.
Exactly.
So what is the tool to fix this? How does a candidate structure their answers so the core competency actually shines through?
The primary tool recommended across the sources is the STAR method. Some variations call it the SPR method. It stands for situation, task, action, result. To avoid misdirected answers, you must structure your response to show a clear logical progression from a problem to a solution.
I like to think of the STAR method as a literal flight plan for your story. You need a point of origin. That's the situation. You need a routed path, the task at hand, and the specific action you took to navigate it. And finally, you need a safe landing, which is the result.
That's a great way to look at it.
If you don't file that flight plan in your mind before you open your mouth, the interviewers get completely lost in the turbulent details of your story, and they miss the core competency you're trying to demonstrate.
Yeah, the panel doesn't want to decipher a rambling narrative. They want to see that you can identify a problem, take decisive action, and reflect on the outcome with total clarity.
Which perfectly sets up the ultimate test of the STAR method. And honestly, this is the part of the deep dive I have been waiting for.
That's a good one.
It's the ultimate test of core competencies like integrity, and it comes in the form of one specific, notoriously stressful interview prompt. The prompt is, tell me about a time you made a bad decision.
Yes, the bad decision question. It is famous for destroying the chances of candidates who aren't thoroughly prepared for the psychology behind it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the premise feels like a massive trap, doesn't it? You're sitting across from a panel of people trying to decide if you are flawless enough to fly their passengers, and they ask you to openly admit that you're flawed, to confess that your judgment is sometimes bad.
It feels counterintuitive. But what's fascinating here is that the evaluators aren't looking for a perfect pilot, because a perfect pilot does not exist.
Right.
They are deliberately testing your decision-making skills under pressure, your integrity, and most importantly, your ability to self-correct in real time.
So how do we navigate this trap? Our specialized source manual breaks it down into an exact step-by-step formula. Step 1 is choosing the right scenario. The absolute golden rule here is pick an innocent, unintentional mistake. You never, ever choose a story that involves an act of willful negligence.
That is a critical dividing line.
Wow.
Willful negligence means you intentionally broke a rule, skipped a mandatory checklist, or, flew recklessly because you were lazy or arrogant.
Yeah.
Admitting to that is an immediate disqualification.
Oh.
An unintentional mistake, however, means you were attempting to do the right thing. But complex circumstances, fatigue, or a momentary lapse in judgment led to an error.
The sources offer a fantastic example of a strong scenario to use for this question. It involves accepting a rushed air traffic control request, specifically a late runway sidestep.
Right, let's break down why that works. Imagine you're coming in to land. You're lined up, configured on a stable glide path. At the last possible minute, air traffic control asks you to shift over and land on a parallel runway instead.
Okay.
You accept the clearance to be helpful at ATC, but the aggressive maneuvering results in an unstable approach.
And for context, an unstable approach is incredibly dangerous, right? It means the aircraft isn't at the correct speed, the correct altitude, or the flaps and landing gear aren't configured properly for a safe touchdown.
Exactly. It's an operational error born out of trying to accommodate the system, not out of malice or rule breaking. You were trying to be a team player for ATC, but you made a bad decision because you ultimately compromised the safety margins of your own aircraft.
Which brings us to step 2 of the formula: absolute responsibility. The manual is relentless about this phase. You must never make excuses.
Never. Yeah.
In the runway sidestep story, the natural human urge is to say, well, ATC really rushed us and the weather was getting bad, so I did my best.
Yeah, but the panel is watching your body language like a hawk here. The moment you try to distribute the blame to ATC or the weather or your first officer, you fail the integrity test.
Wow.
You must entirely own the flawed judgment. You have to look the evaluators in the eye and say, I made a poor calculation in that moment. I prioritized ATC's convenience over the stability of my aircraft, and I compromised the approach.
That takes a lot of guts. But owning it leads right into step 3, immediate correction. You have to explain the decisive action you took to return the aircraft to a safe state, because you can't just leave the story hanging with an unstable aircraft hurtling toward the concrete.
Right, please don't leave it there. In the runway sidestep example, the correct action is immediate and non-negotiable. You recognize the approach is unstable, you announce it to your crew, you call for a go-around, apply maximum thrust, and you climb away to set up for a completely new, safe approach.
Okay, so let's look at the candidate's flight plan for this story so far. You made a bad call, you took absolute responsibility for it, and you executed a go-around to fix the immediate danger. But reading through the sources, I had to pause here. Is surviving the moment really enough to satisfy an elite airline hiring panel?
And the answer is no. Surviving is the bare minimum expectation.
Correct.
What the airline really wants to know is what happens after the aircraft is safely on the ground and the engines are shut down. This is where we enter the feedback loop.
This concept of the feedback loop is brilliant.
It relies heavily on the concept of a safety management system, or SMS. Modern airlines are complex, living organizations. They want pilots who don't just fix their own mistakes in the dark and walk away, but who actively participate in improving the safety of the entire system.
The crucial detail from the sources is that to truly ace the bad decision question, the candidate must explicitly state that they filed a formal safety report after the incident. They specifically single out ASAP or NASA reports. Can you explain what a NASA report is doing in commercial aviation?
Oh, it's one of the most powerful safety tools in the industry. The Aviation Safety Reporting System is administered by NASA, acting as a neutral third-party buffer between the pilots and the FAA.
Okay.
When a pilot makes an unintentional error like accepting that bad runway change, they can file a NASA report. It de-identifies the pilot, meaning their name is stripped from it, and it generally protects them from punitive action by the FAA.
So it basically creates an environment where pilots can be radically honest about their mistakes without fear of losing their license over a human error.
Exactly. By telling the interview panel, after we landed, I filed a NASA report regarding my decision to accept the late sidestep, you're proving something vital. You're contributing to a massive shared database of human error. You are proving that you wanted the company and other pilots across the industry to learn from your mistake.
You essentially turned a personal failure into a systemic asset. You aren't hiding your mistakes, you are illuminating them so the safety net gets stronger for everyone else.
Which brings us to the final step of the bad decision formula. Implementing a permanent fix. It's not just enough to report the error to a government database. You have to fix your own internal operating system.
The candidate must conclude their STAR method response by detailing a personal habit, a hard rule, or a system they developed to prevent that exact error from ever happening again.
Right. You might say something like, since that day, my personal rule is that below 1,000 feet, I will not accept any runway changes or complex requests from ATC. If they ask, the answer is a go-around.
So what does this all mean for the evaluator listening to this?
This raises an important question for the panel. Can this person evolve? This final step is what ultimately reassures them. It proves the candidate brings a high level of self-reflection and a deep, ingrained safety consciousness to the flight deck. They don't just react to problems, they engineer personal solutions to ensure they never repeat them.
It completely shifts the narrative of the entire interview. You move from, I am a flawed pilot who messes up approaches, to, I am a highly evolved, safety-driven professional who learns from reality.
It is the defining difference between a pilot who merely manipulates the flight controls and an aviator who manages the entire operation.
Bringing this all together, what we've learned today is that securing a job in the elite tiers of aviation goes far beyond the baseline of technical flying skills. It requires meticulous preparation, nailing your paperwork, and practicing those cognitive metric tests so you don't trip before the process even begins.
It requires an in-person persona that aligns with your written resume and the social intelligence to build rapport and pass the 6 hours in a metal tube test.
And when you do speak, it requires utilizing the STAR method to map out your answers logically, demonstrating those core competencies like crew resource management.
Yep.
Finally, when faced with the dreaded bad decision question, you use it as a strategic opportunity. You show absolute integrity by taking responsibility, correcting the immediate error, and demonstrating a commitment to systemic safety by utilizing NASA reports and implementing a permanent personal fix.
The lessons drawn from these aviation sources extend far beyond the flight deck. I mean, the way airlines evaluate human failure and demand systemic improvement is something anyone can apply.
Based on the source material's intense focus on that permanent fix, I think there is a fascinating parallel to leave you with today. I would challenge you to look at how you process your own errors.
That's a great point.
In your own life or your own career, when you make a mistake, do you just execute a mental go-around to survive the immediate embarrassment and then move on? Or do you actually take the time to implement a permanent structural system to ensure you never make that exact same mistake again? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.